You don't have to convince people. You just cheat your way to victory, and then you take the people's money. Once in power, never give it up. This is modern economic warfare. It's what happened in Nazi Germany and most recently in Venezuela. It started here, and it's got to stop. There are two types of election fraud we'll talk about. One of them is dirty tricks, and the second is outright electoral theft. We're going to walk through examples: bad, which are the problems, and we'll then have good, which is our battle plan and how we address it, and then we'll wrap up with something beautiful, something that can happen if we all do our part. Today's episode will focus on election dirty tricks. Our next episode will feature outright election theft. Every election has dirty tricks, by both sides. This isn't Republicans or Democrats. Both sides do them. But these aren't only unfair to those who are voting, they're unfair to all of us. Imagine if there's cheating in a Minnesota Senate race. Even if you don't live in Minnesota, it's going to impact. It might determine who the next Supreme Court nominee is. It might determine whether or not we have a bill passed or stopped by a filibuster. What happens in Minnesota, what happens in Oregon, what happens in Arizona and Massachusetts, that impacts you because the senators all vote together, or the congressman. Let me give you some examples of dirty tricks. Telling people the wrong date for an election, or sending voters to the wrong polling place, or manipulating Google search results, or hacking websites, or faking Facebook, or giving out bad voter guides. The first example is one where the Republicans were caught. This is from Axios. It says, over the weekend, Twitter suspended 1,500 fake accounts a pro-Trump group created to mock liberals because the accounts have been spreading false information about Election Day, saying that Election Day is November 7th, when in fact it is Tuesday, November 6th. Well, that's a dirty trick. It's not right. It did happen, and the conservatives were guilty. But it's not just the conservatives. Google and big tech have been manipulating voters, and they can shift millions of votes in any direction they want to. Now, I'm going to quote from USA Today. This is an editorial written by Robert Epstein. Now, if you don't know who Robert Epstein is, he's a senior research psychologist at the American Institute for Behavioral Research and Technology. He's the former editor-in-chief of Psychology Today, and he's the author of 15 books. What he says is, I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm not even a conservative, but I love America and democracy, and I defend truth when I see it. And President Donald Trump is not only justified in expressing misgivings about Google and other tech companies, he seems to have no idea just how big a threat Google and the gang pose to both democracy and human autonomy. In an article in the Epoch Times, I've detailed 10 different methods big tech companies can use to shift millions of votes in the midterm election without anyone knowing they're doing so and without leaving a paper trail for the authorities to trace. Upwards of 12 million votes by my calculations. These powerful new means of manipulation make fake news stories and targeted ads, sources of influence that are both competitive and visible, look like kid stuff. He went on and said, is there any actual evidence of favoritism in Google's search engine? Well, the European Union certainly thinks so, having fined Google $2.7 billion last year for biased search results. In the months leading up to the 2016 election here in the U.S., and this is Robert Epstein still speaking, he says, I led a team that used objective methods to preserve 13,207 online election-related searches and the 98,044 web pages to which the search results linked. These data showed that Google's results favored Hillary Clinton, whom I supported, he says, in all 10 positions on the first page of search results, enough perhaps to have shifted 2 or 3 million votes in her direction over time. He concludes by saying, Google can turn a 50-50 split among undecided voters into an astonishing 90-10 split.